you're probably on a strip mine. So this was
All strip.
this level here was strip mine.
Huh.
All right. Yes.
Was the road did that kind of already exist, or did you have to define
The
it?
road existed. It was a coal haul road and a gas well road. So it was, if it road wasn't there, we wouldn't have this kind of access to the top of the property. My property line goes to the top of this ridge, and like I said, it's wide back here, but then it goes down to the drain down there. So it's like a piece of pie that sits there. It's 55 acres. We have 330 trees that are tapped today, and I probably could do maybe 700-ish on the property if I wanted to. Actually, I have a full-time job that gets in the way of doing what I want to do. So if I didn't have that, I probably would. So up here, we're at the top, and you can see one of the things that I think is really cool about this is that we can take sap that comes from this maple tree, and I don't have to touch it. It goes all the way down to the sugar house. To me, that's just like the coolest thing ever, because otherwise it's hard to transport. But what I tell people when we're up here is that this is not a new and innovative idea in Central Appalachia, right? So the Native Americans were doing this before the Europeans ever got here. Do you know that in Europe there are no maple trees? You know that? They didn't know anything when they came to North America. They didn't know anything about maple syrup or how to do this. The Native Americans taught the settlers how to do this. And the Native Americans made not maple syrup for pancakes and waffles, but they made maple sugar. And one of the ways that they did that was they would gash a tree and they would put a trough of bark into a dugout log that they'd hollow out, and they'd fill that log up with sap. And then they would allow the freezing nights to freeze, 2 inches of the ice on that liquid in there, and then they break that ice out and throw it away. Why? Because the sugars don't freeze first, the water freezes, and it concentrated the liquid that they had there more sugary. They would do that freeze thaw like that and throw in the ice away a couple times. And when it got concentrated enough, they would take hot rocks from a fire, heated in a fire, and put into that liquid in that log. And the steam would evaporate the liquid, and what was left? The sugars that they would scrape up and use, because they didn't have a source of sugar other than what was natural. So they made maple sugar that way. The first year that we sold maple syrup at the farmers market, the first year we tapped our 100 trees, I was tickled to death to take it down there, thinking about how innovative this was and all that kind of stuff. But an old guy came up to me, he was 85 years old, and he said, "Did you make this here?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Right here in Letcher County?" I said, "Yeah, up on Craskali." He said, "I remember when," and he went back to his childhood. He hadn't thought about this for years, but he said, everybody here in the mountains made maple sugar. Not syrup, but they made sugar. They made sugar because he was a kid during the war, and sugar was rationed, it was expensive, and it was hard to get. And their granddaddies made maple syrup and maple sugar before them. In 1860, in North America, they made more maple syrup than they make today. It's hard to believe, because there's a lot of maple syrup production is a big thing. In the 1850, there's an agricultural census for Letcher County that demonstrates that they made almost 1,300 gallons of maple syrup that year.
Wow.
That's amazing. Because when they made it, they didn't have tubing. They didn't have stainless steel evaporators or reverse osmosis units to concentrate. They had steel cast iron cauldrons in the front yard. The old guy that was talking about it said, you driving up and down these creeks on a warm spring day after a cold, and he said you could see steam at everybody's house. Everybody was out doing this because they made sugar. So that generation, though, wanted their children to have it better and easier, right? So you don't work so hard. So you get further away from working hard and you buy your sugar. So in a way, this whole industry can tap into a tradition that we've had here in the mountains in central Appalachia that's almost lost. I mean, it wouldn't take long for that whole memory to have been erased and no connection to be made. So one of the things I think about that's pretty cool about this is tapping into that memory, that tradition, that past. The other thing that I talk about is the economic impact side of doing this. When I have a farm business plan that K-Card helped us develop, and it shows going from 100 trees to 500 trees has the potential to gross our activity, what you see around us, to produce a gross revenue of $77,000 over 5 years. Mm-hmm. On one hand, can't live on that over 5 years. On another hand, it's not a bad side hustle, you know, to make some extra money. But what I really think about is what's out there. You can see Pine Mountain way over there. What do you see when you're up here? There's acres and acres of forest land, but how many maple trees are in Letcher County ready to tap today that are 8 inches or bigger? Any guesses?
I heard you say it over here.
Oh, then don't tell them.
I think I heard too. So.
Okay, all right, so everybody knows. There's 6.9 million maple trees ready to tap today. Now, if you think about 6.9 and my little business plan, that's a lot of possibilities, right? So when I think about this from an economic standpoint, maple syrup production, I'm not pretending that it's like the silver bullet that fixes Appalachia and the coal problem, right? It's not. I mean, it's not anything close. But I don't think there should be a silver bullet either. I don't think we need one industry to come in and replace what coal was here, because we'll end up in the same predicament we do down the road. But I think we need a diverse economy. And I like to think of it like, instead of a silver bullet that comes out of a rifle, we have a shotgun, and we're trying to develop an economy that shoots silver BBs, that's diverse. And there's a lot of different economic impact. And I do think this activity has the possibility to be an economic piece in what could be next, especially if you think of it in the context of agriculture. If you're trying to make a living doing agriculture as a farmer, what are you doing this time of year? You're waiting. The calves haven't calved, the lambs haven't hit the ground, you're not in the field yet. And you can literally turn this sap into cash in 24 hours. And I've done a lot of things with like farming and agriculture. And this is like one of the only things I haven't lost money on. There's actually money to be made. I do think there's economic possibilities for the region, especially when we think in the region. People will refer to this kind of property. There's nothing special about our farm as far as the landscape and the makeup of maple trees on it. It's very typical for what we see around us. But people refer to this type of land as, and I'll quote, worthless hillside property. If you're here long enough, you'll hear the term, all I've got is worthless hillside property. But I want people to understand that there's an asset on that property. There's value there that's latent. It's not being used. It's underutilized. That could be used. This isn't for everybody. Not everybody's going to be a maple syrup maker, right? But for some people, it could be something, and it could be something with the right investment. You could start out with not 100 trees, but you could start out with 5,000 trees. There's plenty of trees around, and you could make a living doing this type of work. So that's kind of like my big picture idea that I try to get into people's minds to think and to consider about the possibilities of what could be.
Now, you said this was strip mined.
Yes.
Was this restored with sugar
So
maples?
what you see, this is contour mined. So they would have only hit a coal seam at this level, and they went this wide here. What I'm standing on is some push out over this, but all this is natural.
Okay.
Down below it. Anywhere that you see on my property that's flat, it's probably been strip mined. But this, I remember I used to rent a home out this way, about in Franklin Branch. It's just maybe a half mile that way. And I can remember walking out through the woods here when this property was being mined. And I didn't know it would be mine someday. In fact, I rolled a tire over one of these hills one day. It was an old tire up here, rolled down just to do it. But this will grow back real quick. Like what you see back there behind you, that's all like reclaimed. So it's been mined and that's been contoured, and all that little scrub tree brush that grew up on it has grown up in the last 25 years. And incidentally, a lot of those trees up there are maple trees. They're red maples, they grow quickly and they come up fast. There's a lot of maple trees through there. Any questions?
Oh, I was just gonna say it's interesting because when you were talking about Vermont earlier. I
Yeah.
feel like that maple syrup really is like one of the things people think of when they think of Vermont, and it
Yeah.
is a big part of their economy.
Right.
But here the season's even longer, as you were saying.
It is. So actually, like the Kentucky Maple Syrup Day is sponsored by the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association. I'm one of the charter members of the association. And I know on the last Maple Day, there was 19 producers involved with the day. I think there's 80 some producers like that are known in the state. And we're just trying to promote this, to get it out there, so that maybe it could be, we dream of, the Bourbon Trail you have through Kentucky. We think of the maple syrup trail, that
Yeah.
maybe someday we could have this sticky trail that people follow and visit. In fact, next year for the association, we're thinking about ways that if people like you visit one maple farm and two maple farm, they can be entered, send that information in, be entered into a contest to win something, or maybe a packet of maple stuff, but
Yeah.
to get people out to visit the farm. You folks are from Chattanooga, did you say? Or
Knoxville.
Knoxville. They came up from Knoxville today. Last Maple Day, we had people from Lynchburg, Bristol, Western Kentucky, Northern Kentucky. I mean, it draws people in, and when people comes in, it's great agritourism. I mean, some people last time got Airbnbs. They ate breakfast somewhere. They
Yeah.
bought gas. It just helps economically too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
yep.
Will you show us a tap?
Yes, right here. How this CO2 taps in it?
Yeah. Okay.
That's a hole drilled in the tree. That tubing connects the lateral line, and there's a green one right there. I change these. That's called a drop line from the tap on down to where it connects in as a drop. I change those drop lines out every 3 years, and I color code them. So you'll see blue ones, green ones, and I think red ones. And that helps me keep up to knowing when they need to be changed. I put a new tap in a tree every year. They get replaced every year. I throw the old ones away because I don't want bacteria going from the tap into the tree. So we put, because the plastic is porous, the whole bacteria, it's
Not with
yeah.
They got climbing up and down, I
Yeah,
tell
up
you.
and down.
Wow.
That 6.9 million is just in this county alone.
I think it's actually,
This one.
I need to clarify and I need
There's
to
another one. See the green one?
research a number. And I'm getting old and forget sometimes. I think it might be Letcher and the surrounding touching counties, actually.
I was gonna say, if it's 6.9 million just in this county, just imagine what they are in the rest of the county.
I think there is actually nearly 2 million in our county. Our county has a lot of maple trees. We're on the southern side. Because of our elevation, it's a little bit cooler, and I think it helps with the maple, especially the hard maple. This is a hard maple tree right here, and they tend to be sweeter than the red maples.
But you're saying other trees can be tapped on the way up. That
Other trees can be tapped, but they don't correspond necessarily with a maple tree. And you don't want to mix the saps either. You don't want to keep them separate because they're very distinct in the taste.
What do you do with the leftover once you shut off production? You have some stuff in your tanks. You say that's the icky stuff.
So some of that stuff, I'll fill the evaporator up with it, and it'll ferment, and it'll create an acid, and it pulls all the minerals and all the scale and stuff off from making it cleans up my stainless steel.
Oh,
So I kind of leave it ferment in there, and it becomes my cleaning agent. And then I rinse it out and throw it away. You can make vinegar out of it. You can make vinegar out of it too. If you take maple sap and condense it to about 13% and age it, it'll become vinegar, a maple vinegar. I fooled around with trying to do some of that too. But that could be a product.
Maple wine or
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, what
Vodka.
about maple brandy? Or something?
maple brandy. That might work.
Well, I have. So one of the things I want to do is I want to age maple syrup in a bourbon barrel. So the bourbon barrel aged maple syrup. It's kind of a thing. But I also got some product from the distillery in town, and I'm trying to age using some of their moonshine. It's a moonshine distillery. And I'm experimenting with aging some maple syrup in that, and maybe we could do something together.
Yeah.
on
Tie
that
the
too.
bourbon trail to the maple syrup.
There you go.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, can I take a picture, you guys? How about we gather around this tree right here, if you don't mind?
It's interesting you're